The masses will always turn towards those who speak to them of absolute truths, and will slight all others. To be a statesman, it is necessary to be able to penetrate the soul of the multitude, to understand its dreams, and to renounce philosophic abstractions. Things in themselves change but little. It is only the ideas that are formed of them that change greatly. It is on these ideas that it is needful to know how to act. Doubtless, our knowledge of the real world is limited to appearances, to mere states of conscience of which the value is evidently relative. But when we adopt the social standpoint, we can say that for a given age and a given society, there are conditions of existence, moral laws and institutions which have an absolute value, since the society in question could not subsist without them. As soon as this value is called in question, or doubt enters men's minds, the society is condemned to an early death. The truths just enunciated may be inculcated without fear, for they are among those which no science can contest. Contrary language can only bring about the most disastrous consequences. The philosophic nihilism propagated at the present day by authorized voices among weak minds induces them to believe at once in the absolute injustice of our social system and in the absurdity of all monarchies, inspires them with a hatred of all that exists, and leads them directly to socialism and anarchism. Modern statesmen are too persuaded of the influence of institutions and too little of the influence of ideas, and yet science shows them that the former are always the offspring of the latter, and have never been able to subsist without leaning on them as a foundation. Ideas represent the invisible springs of things. When they have disappeared, the underlying supports of constitutions and civilizations are destroyed. It was always a redoubtable moment for a people when its old ideas descended into the somber necropolis where the dead gods repose. Going on from the causes to study the effects, it has to be admitted that visible decadence seriously threatens the vitality of the majority of the great European nations, and especially of those known as the Latin nations, and really Latin nations if not as regards their blood, at least as regards their traditions and education. Every day they are losing their initiative, their energy, their will, and their capacity to act. The satisfaction of perpetually growing material wants tends to become their sole ideal. The family is breaking up. The social springs are strained. Discontent and unrest are spreading to all classes, from the richest to the poorest. Like the ship that has lost its compass and strays as chance and the winds direct, the modern man wanders at haphazard through the spaces formerly peopled by the gods and rendered a desert by science. He has lost his faith, and with it his hopes. The masses, grown excessively impressionable and changeable, and no longer kept in check by any barrier, seem fated to oscillate without intermission between the wildest anarchy and the most oppressive despotism. Words will turn their heads, but their divinities of a day are soon their victims. In appearance they seem ardently to desire liberty. In reality, they will have none of it, and they are incessantly appealing to the state to forge them chains. They yield blind obedience to the obscurest sectaries, to the most narrow-minded despots. The rhetoricians who imagine they lead the masses, but who most often follow them, confound the impatience and nervousness that find vent in an incessant desire for a change of master, with the true spirit of independence that girds against any master whatever. The state, whatever be the nominal regime, is the divinity towards which all parties turn. It is the state that is appealed to for regulations and protection, every day more oppressive, that surround the most trivial acts of existence with the most Byzantine and tyrannical formalities. The younger generations are more and more disposed to renounce careers demanding judgment, initiative, energy, personal effort, and will. The slightest responsibility alarms them. They are content with the mediocre prospects offered them by state-paid employment. The commercial classes ignore the colonies, which are solely peopled by functionaries. Footnote. In a speech pronounced in the Chamber on Deputies on November 27, 1890, by M. Etienne, at the time Under Secretary for the Colonies, I note the following very characteristic passage, which I borrow from the newspaper Le Cycle. Quote, Cochin China has 1,800,000 inhabitants. Of this number, 1,600 are Frenchmen, 1,200 of whom are functionaries. The country is administered by a colonial council elected by these 1,200 functionaries. It has a deputy, and you are surprised that anarchy reigns in the country! Exclamation and laughter on a great number of benches. Quote, are you aware what is the outcome of such a system? Its outcome is this phenomenon, that 9 millions out of a budget reduced to 22 millions is absorbed by the expenses in connection with the functionaries. Quote, yes, in 1877 I tried to reduce the number of functionaries. I reduced the expenses by 3,500,000 francs out of a total of 9 millions. I took this measure in the month of October. In December, the cabinet of which I was a member was overthrown, and in the following March, the functionaries I had suppressed were reinstated. Unquote. End of footnote. Energy and action have been replaced among statesmen by terribly empty personal discussions, in the case of the masses by passing enthusiasms or hatreds, in the case of men of letters by a sort of tearful, vague, and unfruitful sentimentalism, and by colorless dissertations on the miseries of existence. A boundless egoism is developing on all sides. The individual is coming to be solely preoccupied with himself. Consciences are capitulating and morality is deteriorating and gradually dying out. Footnote. This lowering of morality is serious when observed in professions such as the magistracy and the profession of notary, in which honesty used to be as general as courage among soldiers. As regards the notaries, morality has at present descended to a very low level. The official statisticians affirm, quote, that among the notaries there is a proportion of 43 accused persons out of 10,000 individuals, whereas the average for the whole population of France is 1 accused person for the same number of individuals, unquote. In a report addressed to the President of the Republic by the Minister of Justice and published in the Journal Officiel, January 31st, 1890, I find the following passage, quote, the disasters which as early as 1840 had begun to inspire the public with uneasiness increased progressively to such a degree that in 1876 one of my predecessors had to call the special attention of the magistrates to the situation of the notaries. The dismissal of notaries and notarial catastrophes were occurring with unaccustomed frequency and under circumstances of great gravity. The number of disasters rose successively from 31 in 1882 to 41 in 1883 to 54 in 1884 to 71 in 1886, and the total embezzlements committed by notaries amounted to 62 million francs for the period between 1880 and 1886. Finally, in 1889, 103 notaries were dismissed or obliged to give up their practice. Unquote. If we connect with these facts the successive ruin of our most important financial enterprises, the committoir, d'escompte, the dépôt, et comptes courants, Panama, etc., it can only be admitted that the invectives of the socialists against the morality of the leading classes are not without foundation. The same symptoms of demoralization are unfortunately to be observed among all the Latin peoples.